Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make perfect chocolate cake. And yes, I do mean perfect chocolate cake in the sense that it is really, really moist, perfect density, the flavor is great, and it keeps really, really well. Now this recipe actually came from my mom, who used it in a bakery that she worked in many years ago before I was born. And even to this day, I have made no changes to this recipe because it is just that good. I've used this recipe in cake decorating classes that I teach, and people have said it's the best chocolate cake they've ever had. All of my clients who order chocolate cakes, this is the recipe I use. This is just my good go-to chocolate cake recipe, and I have a feeling it will be yours as well. The full written recipe is in the description. You guys are absolutely going to love this recipe. We're gonna be using a mixer because this makes a decent amount of batter, so I would recommend a stand mixer. If you don't, a hand mixer is going to be your best friend. You wanna cream some softened, unsalted butter with brown sugar. I have noticed that the brown sugar is what helps contribute to the moisture in this cake. It is a very moist and flavorful cake, and I think the brown sugar really helps contribute not only to the moisture, but the flavor as well. You want to cream your brown sugar and your softened butter for a good few minutes. It's 2 sticks of butter and 3 cups of brown sugar. After that's been going for a few minutes, I'd recommend 3 to 5 minutes for that. We're gonna go in with room temperature eggs. This just helps them incorporate a little bit better. I'm using 4 large room temperature eggs, 1 at a time. And once those are all mixed in, we're gonna go in with a tablespoon of vanilla extract. Once that is all mixed in, we're gonna go in with sour cream. Now, sour cream is an acidic ingredient that is not only going to react with the baking soda that we're gonna be adding later on to create a nice airy texture in the cake, but it also is gonna help keep it moist and add some richness to it. So once you've added in your sour cream, give it another mix until combined, and then we're gonna mix together our dry ingredients separately. So in a large bowl, we have some all-purpose flour, 2 2/3 cups, and then we're gonna be adding in 1 cup of cocoa powder. You wanna make sure you sift it just to get out any lumps. That way there's no lumps in the cake batter. We're also adding a tablespoon of baking soda and 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. Just give that a nice whisk until it's all really well combined. And we're gonna be alternately adding this to the batter with the mixer on low with 1 1/3 cups of hot water. You can use hot coffee if you like. Coffee actually really enhances the flavor of chocolate in cakes or any dessert you add it to. So don't worry if you don't like coffee. You don't taste it at all in this recipe. It just enhances the chocolate flavor. But hot water is just as good as well. The reason it needs to be hot is because heating the cocoa in this batter is gonna do something called blooming it, which is really waking it up, and it's gonna help intensify the cocoa flavor. So don't add cold water, make sure it's hot. Just alternately add your dry mixture with the hot water in about 3 parts. And once the mixture is almost done, just finish it off with a spatula to avoid overmixing, and that way you can ensure that you've scraped the entire bowl down and make sure everything has gotten mixed in. This recipe makes 3 8-inch layers of cake. You can use 9-inch layers if you don't have an 8-inch cake pan. Just note that the layers will be slightly thinner. Also, the oven is going to be preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. The way I like to grease cake pans, because there are several ways to do it, is I'll spray it with some cooking spray, line it with parchment, and I actually use these parchment rounds. They are just such a time saver, and I order like a bulk pack of 200 at a time. They're very cheap online. I will link that down below. But I'll spray the pan, line it with the parchment round, and spray the parchment as well. That way you just absolutely know that cake is definitely gonna be coming out of there. Now, when it comes to dividing this into the prepared cake pans, I like to use a cookie scoop. The one I'm using right here is a 2 3/4 inch cookie scoop, and I find that I can just count the number of scoops I'm putting into each pan to ensure that they are exactly the same thickness. I do this because I'm first off really OCD, but also because I sell so many cakes, I need to make sure the layers are exactly even. You can weigh them with a scale, but if you don't have a scale, you can use a scoop like this and simply count the number of scoops you're putting into each pan to make sure they're all exactly the same. And then another thing I do is I'll tap them around to make sure that batter is evenly spread, and I'll give it a solid few knocks on the counter to get out any air bubbles. You want to put this in your preheated oven for 32 to 35 minutes. The real key here is to use a toothpick, stick it all the way down to the bottom of that cake pan, and it should come out with maybe 1 or 2 crumbs on it, but for the most part, it should be clean. And if it is, you are good to remove them from the oven and cool them in the pans for about 10 minutes. After that 10 minutes, you want to turn them onto cooling racks, gently peel off that parchment, and then let them cool completely if you're going to use them that day. Now, this is a chocolate cake recipe I make a lot of the time in advance because it freezes really well. And if you are somebody that wants to get into cake decorating as a hobby, or maybe you want to start selling cakes, this is something I would strongly recommend with this recipe. Let them cool and then double wrap them with plastic wrap, and you can put them in the freezer and they last for a good week in the freezer. And every single time I've done that, nobody could tell the difference. The texture was still fantastic. It wasn't dry at all. The flavor was great. You would never know that the cake was frozen. Plus, decorating slightly frozen cake layers is way easier. And once again, the full written recipe for this fantastic cake recipe down in the description, so don't worry, and I will link the parchment paper rounds that I use, as well as my other social media, so you guys can go check that out and give me a follow there as well. Please give this video a thumbs up. Leave me some comments if you have any questions, if there's anything you want to see, or if you have anything about this recipe, let me know in the comments. And please hit that subscribe button and join me every week for new episodes and recipes with fantastic things for you to try at home. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.